Hey friends, Jeff here with a new episode of Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. Today we welcome Patrick Coyle. Patrick is the founder of the advisory firm Novus Proximus. At Novus Proximus, they are supporting healthcare and life science organizations to transform how work is done to ultimately deliver superior results and life-changing results for patients. Patrick has spent his career in finance, and he certainly has an expertise in supporting his clients in that area, but he goes well beyond that in supporting them around culture, around leadership, around vision. Who Patrick has become to me over the time I've gotten to know him is pioneer. That's the word that just oozes out of him. He's a pioneer in how he sees life and how he leads his family, how he's leading organizations, in having the courage to do the hard thing. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Patrick Coyle. Patrick Coyle, it is a delight to be able to have you on the podcast today as a guest, and really excited to dive into some important topics in not only life science, but in all industries and how we're making sense of the world today. So again, welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So why don't you, just as a start, I did a brief introduction before we began, but as a start, just give us a sense of what you're up to in the world.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I recently founded a company by the name of Novus Proximus. And Novus Proximus means the new next. And I've been doing a lot of advisory work and consulting to help leaders prepare for what's here now and what's coming in the future, specifically in life sciences. But I think a lot of those lessons are very applicable across industries.
I love that. Yeah, I love the name. What's behind is there something deeper? You gave us a definition, but what's that mean for you, that the name that you gave your company?
When I looked around, I see a lot of inefficiency out there in the world today, in the business world specifically. And for me, we always talk about future-proofing business. And then I started thinking, are we now ready? Right? So the events of the last few years have really accelerated, to be cliche, digital transformation, but the way that we think and the evolution of our mindfulness. And we have to be ready and keep adapting. At the same time, the advancement and the lack of availability of human resources and capital and the ability to work in person really created this opportunity for businesses to evolve very rapidly. And I think it's very critical that as a civilization, we all evolve as rapidly as some of those businesses are. So that's what Novus Proximus is created to help.
Yeah, I love that. I love the name, and I love that it just prompts curiosity and wonder about what does that mean? And there's a ton in what you just said, and we'll definitely get to that. But one of the things we like to do on the show is create a little bit more dimension of who our guests are, and even beyond what the resume says or what LinkedIn tells us about you. And so to do that, I'd love for you to share with us your 3 H's. And the 3 H's are hero, highlight, a highlight, and a hardship. What's your 3 H's?
Thank you. So a hero of mine ever since childhood is Martin Luther King Jr. And really, in the face of a tremendous adversity and everything going against him, he persevered to advance the civil rights movement, and was not alone in that, but certainly was a tremendous founding leader of that movement. And that's a lot of where I have grounded myself in. How can I help advance the causes that I believe in and provide a better world for us all to live in? And I really got a lot of those lessons from him. Now, as far as highlights, I think for me, really a highlight is is my leadership and how I've grown in a different, let's say, set of styles ready for the future. And I think we'll probably talk about that a lot during COVID and leading remotely, and for a long time, 100% remotely, a large scale organization. And then I think for a hardship, something that really drives me in a big founding principle of Novus Proximus is the affordability, the access to care for patients and people. And our system needs a lot of help. And the longer I've been in the healthcare industry, I've realized where those gaps are. I know how to connect people and opportunities and make the world a better place by advancing healthcare for all. And that's a real big key mission of mine, is to evolve that standard of care continuously. And so that's a hardship that everybody has felt in different ways and can relate to.
Yeah, and I mean, your why is kind of baked into all of that. At least what I'm sensing your why being, even going back to when you were a kid and identified Martin Luther King Jr. as a hero, and you mentioned society there a few times, in the hero, hardship, and the highlight, and I'm wondering, where does that come from for you, that desire? I think you just said make the world a better place. What are the earliest seeds of that being a desire that was percolating in you?
I think my parents, really how they raised me, and with the integrity and just to always do the right thing. And I think once, that really started sinking in, is okay, well, where does the right thing stop? And where you can help people, and that difference we can make. And I think when you look back, and I certainly think that every day that I'm not helping somebody on this planet is a wasted day. And how do you work into a position where you can help and magnify that, and help as many people as possible? And there's so many ways that we can all do that. It's not. I think a lot of time leaders think of trade-offs, right? If I do this, I can't do that. I don't believe that there's as many trade-offs as barriers that we affect as leaders and individuals.
Do you remember, and this is my curiosity coming out, Patrick, do you remember as a kid, like the very first cause, I'll call it a cause, something outside of you, something that was bigger than you? Can you remember that one of that very first cause that just grabbed your attention, your heart, and maybe you didn't do anything at the time, maybe you did. I'm just curious, do you recall what that first one was?
Yeah, I was actually in elementary school and was witness to a pretty bad bullying incident. That it took me years, I think, to remember, but I had to step in, and it really changed me because I saw how people can treat each other, and the unfairness of that, and I think that's where it kind of connected me to looking at a lot of other leaders that were making a tremendous impact in the world, and socially and economically.
Mm.
And I believe you can do both. And I think when that really showed me that we should have a much more equitable equation than we do.
Isn't it amazing? Just as an aside, amazing how those early experiences, for me, it was a fateful Saturday afternoon. My dad took me and my brother to volunteer at a Special Olympics, and I still remember that. And you shared that situation. It's just amazing how, and I know you're a dad as well. I'm a dad of two. Just how those early experiences can shape your entire life. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, thank you. It's I think there's a lot more of those, I think, along the way, and I still am touched. I think another one for me was the first time I met a mother of who is a survivor of a very late stage colorectal cancer.
Mm,
And she talked about how she never thought she would be able to see her daughter graduate,
mm,
and go to prom, and that she had already seen that. And she had lived long enough on one of the life-saving therapies that I was a part of
mm,
helping along the way in the journey. And that showed me the difference you can make on an individual. And then she was talking about my new goal is waiting for her to graduate college, right? And then I'm not going to set an end goal, right? And I think it's, when you can be a part of making such a difference in someone's life, there's not enough time in the day.
Yeah. So with that passion, with that why as your fuel, let's frame the podcast, the title as Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. With your passion clear from just these little snippets you've given us, what are the conversations that you would love life science leaders to be having, but they're not, or they're not having them as fully as you think they should be?
Yeah, I think during COVID, and I say that because in many ways it seems like it's over, although it's not. But I think the largest amount of the impacts, have been, transitioning over time, right? And so I think, we went from this survival mode, all of us, into, okay, how do we escape into something else? And I think then we evolution in the evolutionary chain. It's like, okay, how do we start learning how to thrive again?
Mm.
And I think a lot of businesses were very opportunistic in finding ways to save money, finding ways to engage with their employees differently and their customer base. Supply chain challenges helped us evolve very rapidly there. However, we still have some pretty big supply chain issues now. And I think geopolitical, position that we're in also changes the scenario, also commingled a bit with that supply chain. And I think, for leaders now going in, it's okay, what is going to happen next, right? What is the next event that could never happen? We had none of us had lived for the most part through a pandemic, right? I think you may find a few people that had remembered the one 1918. But I think for us now, okay, what event can't happen that may happen? And how do we prepare for that? And we always talked about the future. Are you future proof? Is your business future proof? But I like to say, are you now ready? Because that future's here. You read about science fiction. We heard about these movies, like we saw these movies rather, like RoboCop. Now there are robotic armed service, members being deployed in cities. There's restaurants and fast food restaurants that are going with automated workforces. And and a lot of this digital transformation, robotic evolution is here now. And I think for leaders, they're a lot of them are hanging on to the past, and it's already gone. There's no fixing that. So we have to just say, are we really ready? And I talk to a lot of executives and CEOs that say, I'm not. When you talk to them, you get to know them. I think they're a lot more open and say, maybe I'm not as ready as I think we are. Is there something I could be doing differently? And I think that's where I've been able to share some experiences of leading with empathy remotely during those times. And at the same time, how do we leverage the gains, to not have setbacks on the future progress?
So tell us about your experience during COVID. Like, was it hard? Did you struggle? Did you thrive? Tell us about your experience in and then through that period where we were locked down, and even beyond the lock. There was a period where no one was doing anything, hardly. But when things started to open back up and businesses were doing work, your company was doing work. Like, what was your experience during that period that has enabled you now to look back and then to also help others?
Yeah, thank you. I think that what helped us be ready for it was being prepared. And I think that one of the lessons in life is you always have to be prepared for the unknown. And doesn't have to be so ambiguous as you can pick events and start to think about the likelihood of them happening and draw scenarios around them and walk back to say, how can I be ready for these types of things to reduce anxiety if they happen? And for us, it was becoming much more digitized. and moving away from having to do things in person wherever possible, right? There's always going to be a lot of roles that have to be, but there are a lot that could be more virtual, and you could apply, mind over matter a bit more. And
Mhm.
so I think it was getting ready for that, and we were very prepared for when the pandemic hit that we could work as a fully functioning team remotely. Now, with that said, in the very beginning, there was no roadmap. There was, how long is this going to last? Your first couple of days taking calls from the bedroom. Okay, then you got to get an office. What's been very important for me is ever since the beginning, leading with tremendous amount of empathy and really trying to put yourself in someone else's position. And I think that's something that as business leaders, we need to really understand and get behind is how do we connect with our people? And individuals matter. People matter. They're the foundation of everything we do. And if you can evolve the process and automate the work, then you can elevate the people to really use their mind, because the mind can't be replicated yet. It's very complex. We can't figure out how all the mechanics work. And we can use that more if we stop using our hands as much. And so for me, it was connecting every day in the beginning with 60 plus people in Zoom calls and town halls, leveraging technology and advancements that were there, but just asking, do you guys have what you need? Here's the game plan for today. Here's the game plan for tomorrow. So becoming more accessible for everybody. And I think when you do that, there's a level of trust that's established. And we all went through this together. So I had good days, I had bad days. I mean, we all were affected with family and friends that we lost along the way. And I think being able to connect with people and to share their stories and their challenges and give them a platform to again trust their fellow teammates and colleagues, and it really created this very close-knit community for us. And then I think we started scaling away back from having to do this every day to a couple times a week, and then every week. There's also an opportunity to bring in mindfulness. So one of the things that tremendous individual that I became very good friends with along the way came in and really helped us evolve our mindset and our mindfulness. And it was constantly taking a temperature check of the organization to say, okay, what do they need today? What do they need tomorrow? And let's help them get there.
Mm. You were in that time in a C-level position. What what did you observe in your CEO at that time that that made such a massive difference? Because as we know, culture is set at the top, and and that person, how they show up. So what did you observe in the CEO that you were working with at the time that really made the difference?
I think it's a great question, and it's all of what can I do, right? No matter what position you're in the company, what can I do to affect change and to make a difference? And I think you're right. From the top down is let's say the easiest and maybe most productive, but everybody can take a groundswell too. So I think we worked at it a bit from the groundswell, but at the same time, the CEO's passion for patients and for people really cleared the deck, right? Because once you knew that, how much people matter and their safety and concerns for that, then it gives you the freedom to create and be a leader however you need to be along the way. And I think that's part of the challenge out there today. And some of the things I talk to people about and help executives is, okay, how do I get that? Maybe I don't have as much empathy as I need to. How do I? And by the way, there's companies like Apple that train empathy for their workers in their stores, and how effective all these things are is a bit still being subjective. But I think, how do we learn more about being empathetic? How do we connect with the people more? How do we get them more productive? Right? We know all about the quiet quitting and the Great Resignation. but people stay together when they feel like they're in a trusting environment where they're cared for and nurtured, and they're highly productive. I mean, the productivity of our teams went through the roof, and the connectivity. And sometimes I actually had to tell people, stop working, go on vacation, do something, because they just felt like they were all motivated to keep contributing. And at a time where you hear that, you know, people are going in one direction or another direction, I think leaders have to really look and think, okay, what can I do to make a difference in people's lives and help them and help the business?
I'm just so curious in your observation, because you're not talking about complex things here. You're talking about connecting, about setting vision, not just vision 2 years, like this vision for today, the vision for tomorrow. You're talking about some pretty basic, not necessarily easy, but basic building blocks. In your observation, what's getting in the way? Because you're still, even though these are straightforward things, you're still observing or having conversations with people saying, Patrick, help us, or how do I do this? What in your assessment is getting in the way of companies thriving in this new world of specifically, I know there's lots of elements that we're going to talk about, but specifically with employees and getting their best, supporting them to give their best?
Yeah, I think as a CFO, you know very well that past performance is not a predictor of future success, right?
Yeah.
And I think we could all learn a bit from that. That I think in general, it's way too easy to get stuck in the past. This is what worked. You talked about what shaped me and helped me think differently. I think it works against you too, because people say, this is what happened to me in the past. This is what I remember. When I tried this, that happened. Or I did this and it worked really well, so I'm going to keep doing that. And I think that we're living through such a period of rapid change, like we haven't experienced in decades, if even in our lifetimes, that we have to let go of the past. The past is an anchor that weighs you down, and it's intended to be learned from, to be studied, not forgotten, and not changed, because it happened in a context of a certain time, a certain way, a certain set of circumstances. So, even when you're leaving reviews for businesses, right, on Google, it was that moment in time. How could it be referenced in the future? Maybe the whole staff turned over. Maybe the whole menu turned over at a restaurant that you had a good experience with or a bad one. So the faster we realize that, the past is that, learn from it, don't erase it, and study it, and don't ever replicate the bad parts of the failures, but rather build upon that for future success. And I think that's where, again, it really drives me now to say, how can we all be more optimally working? How can we connect with people more? And the whole employment contract changed significantly. And so it used to be, that a company engaged you for your whole career and helped take care of you through transition, next steps, the life steps. And then we went to this employment at will and, consolidation and mergers and acquisitions. And then we went into this, period of accelerated growth. And now we're in this, the younger generations have a very different work pact, right? And what drives them and I see a lot of senior leaders who have been, in business for a long time. They keep saying one thing and the people keep saying another. And I think it's trying to, neither one is going to get there on their own. So you have to build a bridge to connect these generations. And I think, when you understand people and what drives them, it goes back to the empathy. What did they live through, right? The kids that just lived through COVID, graduated high school during lockdowns, their mindset, their mental health, that stays with them, right? These don't let go because COVID's over, right? Yeah. Or ending. So I just think we have to just keep, these things in mind, and learn from the past, but don't get stuck there. So that leaders get stuck pretty easily in the past.
Is there a particular, we'll call it an anchor from the past, that you see is perpetually weighing people down? So this is how we've always done it. This is how we're going to continue to do it. Is there a particular, I'm going to call it a thing of the past that is the anchor as you described it? One of them that is most pervasive.
I think success is success is iterative. So I think sometimes a specific past success,
Mm,
that they may continue to draw upon that and expect that to keep working. I think that's a big one, but I just think we're wired. We need to rework the wiring in our brains
mm,
to go from looking in the rear view to looking forward.
mm.
And I think it has a lot to do with positivity. And there's obviously a lot of academic work and a lot of the mindfulness that I helped bring to the equation, and a great partner I worked with. Let's evolve our minds to think about others more, to think about what's coming more, to let go of the past, and how can we work differently. And um, simple things of just, this conversation happened at one time under a certain set of circumstances, and maybe next time it's in a different one. So
Yeah.
leaving that baggage behind and not bringing it with you is really critical.
Yeah, I love the simple example you gave of a Google review. We go on Yelp or we go on Google review and we see someone's experience. And there was a particular set of circumstances and context, and maybe nothing has changed. And the context is exactly the same as it was a year ago when that person left that good or bad review, but maybe not. And so I love to ask the question. Yeah, I love what the question that you're inviting us to ask is, how is today unique? How is today, tomorrow, the next day? How is that unique? I love framing it in that way, and the question that you're inviting us to ask. It's really powerful.
Yeah, thank you. And I think another big anchor, right, in an event is going to be COVID. And it's so easy that the country is so divided right now. And you think about, okay, why did this happen? Why did this person do this way? Why did this person do this that way? And it's you don't know all the circumstances that surrounded their decisions or lack of decision making at that time. You don't know the area that they lived in, and the other things that were influencing outcomes. And so I think it's, again, it's really easy to bring that prejudice along, or you could just say everybody did the best that they can during those times. And now we're in a different time. So let's move forward. And again, instead of just looking back all the time, and I think you see that on the news. The news is not reporting what's happening today. It's still reporting what happened in the past. And you have to find, open your eyes and talk to people and walk around and to connect the dots. And I think that's when I started doing that, is really to see, okay, that the world around us is being automated. And, how many people, need to really change before, they blink and it's gone past them.
Yeah.
And that's leaders, that's everybody in the world.
So I want to bring us to now, okay, where do we go from here? We're learning some lessons from the past, and you're giving us some great tools of how we can start to be even more present. So now, as we look forward, you've used this term future proof the business. You've used that 2 or 3 times in that conversation. What does that term actually mean for you?
Well, I think before it used, we always had this ambiguous future where the change was eventually going to catch up, and you had a lot of time to prepare, right? You can always make more money in life. You can't make more time. And so it sounds a bit cliche to say time is money, but that rapid acceleration of advancement of technology in the world, and whether all of our mindsets, mindfulness evolved the same way is definitely not true. But I think what we need to do is really say, are we ready now for that future we always dreamed of before,
Hmm.
right? And worried about? It's here. And so, I talk a lot about the evolution of finance. And I think it's just, it's near and dear to me, but I think it's the evolution of work and business is, am I doing the same thing that I've always been doing? Right. Question that everybody has to ask themselves. I've always asked myself in every position I've been in, what is the, how much of an impact can I make and leave it as sustainable as possible so that I can move on and make a bigger difference in something else. And I think everybody needs to say, am I doing the same thing every single day? That's Groundhog Day.
Right.
So the whole concept of a job is changing. Work is fractional, more fractional than ever. The need for contingent labor, and that's for how we think about contingent labor and treat people. They're all people, whether they're full-time or whether they're fractional or part-time. And I think project-based work, right? So I think you're going to have to say, the technology and machines are going to do X amount of the work. And what do I need to do? What can I do to help with the rest of that? And companies are going to engage employees and people very differently for specific needs. So there's going to be a lot more project-based work, tied to company goals and objectives. But I think kind of the thought of doing the same thing every day is over.
Mm.
And it's very, so talk about the anxious of the past. What do you mean? I love waking up in the morning. I got to brush my teeth and go to the bathroom, take a shower, eat breakfast, kiss the kids, go to work, right? That's changed.
Mm.
And just the go to work part, what does that mean? Maybe it's okay, I'm going to skip breakfast and just walk into the other room today. And so we just have to know that the same thing, doing it every single day, is over. And that's very uncomfortable. And so I also, I really talk about, for me, I've done some pretty uncomfortable things in the last year. And I think through that time of uncomfortable and change, you can really accelerate growth.
Mm.
And so I think people have to really create a little bit of healthy tension in the system and their lives as well.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a minute in what you're saying, and imagine I'm a CEO or leader in a company, and responding to what you just said, Patrick, I get it, but I'm only as good as today's stock price, maybe tomorrow's, maybe this quarter, but I'm only as good as today's stock price and the return that I'm generating for my shareholders. So I totally agree, but I have to live for today, or again, maybe this quarter. So what's your response to me to playing that? I'm calling it devil's advocate.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, probably for the CFO, I could speak to that role there, because, they're in tandem as the right hand, to the CEO. And I think what they have to help shape that story with the CEO, right? And with the whole executive team, to make sure everybody's thinking the same thing, that we have to prepare for the future now. And so much of a stock price and an evaluation for a company, it is already baked in what's the future opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were to say to the street, where we are today is where we're going to stay, you'll have a perfect evaluation of market capitalization, right? Because there's nothing else built in. And so that's just not reality. Reality is, always talking about the future and where you're going to go and where you're going to be, but not just talk. It's okay, now I have to take actions and make it happen. And I think that's the difference, because over the last few years, there's a lot of opportunity for people to be distracted, for a lot of business to get a lot of funding in different ways and be capitalized in different ways that maybe the leadership teams weren't prepared for. And there was a shortage of workers, specifically a shortage of workers to do certain things. And so you're seeing the fallout of that in some big resignations or company failures. And so I think we have to go back to the time of really good controls, regulation changes, compliance, and put back that rigor that was developed over decades to protect against that. But then you have to say, I have a vision for the future, which is now, and I'm going to take steps because I'm ready or I'm not ready. And I think, that same pact with our employees of being trusting, of evoking trust and being collaborative and sharing information is the same thing that you have to do with your business partners, with the stakeholders, the street, is that you have to say, listen, this is our situation and this is what we're doing to improve it. And a lot of those companies are being tasked to do that now. So I think you're going to see the shakeout, like you've seen in the news, of some big kind of let's say, epic failures that didn't just fail the shareholders, it failed society.
Yeah.
And there's I had a post recently that got a lot of attention because people are clamoring for some of those things to go back, right? So maybe there's parts of the past that are still good that we can't let go of, right? We can't move so fast that we forget about the good
Right.
controls, and the fiduciary duty of CFOs and CEOs and the other executives.
Yeah. What I'm really getting is how critical in today's world, it's always been important, but I'm getting, as you're talking, the alignment of all of these folks. So CFO, CMO, all the C-suite with the CEO, with the board, if there's a board, that it is like everybody is in lockstep on the story and the crafting of the story, how they tell the story, and then the strategy. It just feels like to me, Patrick, that this alignment in creating what's next is as important, maybe more important than it has ever been in our lifetime.
I absolutely agree because I think there's so many individual interests that have been brought into employment situations at all levels because there's no normal anymore, right? And people have walked out of organizations, they've moved, they've changed careers, they've changed their minds, they don't look at life the same way. Maybe they lost people, they almost lost their lives, and they lived ways that they didn't want to. And so there's all this turbulence out there, and people are showing up with a lot of different baggage, but you just don't see it. And I think it's more important for leaders than ever to be able to get behind, the person, to understand where they're coming from, to understand their experiences, and help bridge those gaps. You just can't come in and say, "We're doing this."
Yeah.
Okay, you may get a bunch of heads nodding, but nobody's really listening. And I think when you can connect with people and understand what their interests are at all levels, especially at the C-suite, and create that connectivity, you really, really have a powerful organization that can change and be ready now
Mm.
for that future.
Yeah. And you spoke about your own journey over the last year of taking some courageous steps of making the decision to relocate your family, to start your company. And so you pointed to the courage that's required in life sometimes. And I'm just getting the sense that's really what you're calling for as well from these leaders is courage. The courage to not lean on the past, but to step into something new, to pioneer into the future. Is that at the essence? Am I getting that right? That's really what you're calling forward in people? There's the economics and the finances and the strategy, but it feels like at the heart is courage. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely, courage, and I think the other side of the coin is perseverance,
Hmm.
right? And back to what we talked about with Martin Luther King, doing the tough thing that others don't want to do, or when making the right decisions when nobody's looking, and having that perseverance, the courage to take the first steps, and the perseverance to see it through. In anything we do, work or life is really critical. And I think we just had this big comfort, this comfort level for a very long time that we don't. You look around today, we're in a state of alert in many parts of this globe. And once you see it, I think on the news for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, you start to become a little um, tone deaf to it. But it's there, and so I think there's just more and more of this building. And the pandemic was the start of it, but it's not the end of it.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap here in a second, but I would love for we're going to wave a magic wand and you get to seed in the minds of C-suite boardrooms everywhere, one conversation. We've talked about a lot of things here, but you have this magic wand moment where you get to seed in the minds, in the hearts of C-suites and CEOs all over the globe, one conversation. what would that one conversation be that you want them to be having this week?
That's a great question. I think, back along, are we ready?
Hmm.
You talked about the current stock and what's going on with the business today, and say, how do you really evaluate where you are, right? And I think it's when you talk to having tough conversations, and interviewing your employees, right? We're always evaluating them. Are we taking stock of what they think of us?
Hmm.
And I think at the same time, having those tough conversations to figure out, where are we today? What is our culture like? I know what I wrote on a card. I know what I keep putting on the presentation. Are we really living it? Do our
Hmm.
people feel it, or we just keep saying it as leaders? And so I think the culture is part of, transparency, connectivity, empathy. That's all really, really critical to foster the right culture for a company, that they can be free to create, to
Hmm.
try and fail, to create discovery. Those things are really critically important, and being able to say, look in the mirror. We're doing great today. Are we going to do great tomorrow? Or are we doing as good today as we think we are? And I think and are we doing it with purpose?
Hmm.
Right. And I think you always talk about the passion, this, passion, that. I'm passionate about basketball. Okay. But my purpose is to make the world a better place to live in. And so, are we defined by a purpose
Yeah.
that we can connect to and people can see and feel and touch? Like, so for CEOs, really important that their executive team knows who they are.
Hmm.
And we can all share in that success together.
Hmm. Patrick, we've only scratched the surface. This has been such a rich conversation. Really am grateful that you've shared your heart as well as your mind and your thoughts. If people want to connect with you and learn more about what you're up to, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, thank you. I think, LinkedIn is still a great connector of people in the business world, sometimes more than the business world. But I think for me, connecting that way is really great. And they can connect to my business. We can talk, and I'm here. And my advisory and helping people doesn't it transcends all levels. So I love to engage in conversations of all kinds. So please reach out to me and connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. This has been such a fun and I know helpful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope it really benefits the listeners and makes them think about something that they can do to make the world a better place as well. Thank you.